Welcome back. We're here 2 weeks in a row. We are thriving here on Stepping Toward Justice. We took a long break, but here we are 2 weeks in a row. I feel like we deserve a cookie, Zeke. How about you?
Hey, I had a cookie for dessert after dinner, so I'm a step ahead of you.
You must have been a good boy today.
I deserved a cookie today.
Hard worker. Well, good.
Deserved a cookie today.
Lots going on in our old friend Alex Murdaugh's, and I say friend very loosely, in his federal sentencing today.
Yeah, are we ever going to stop talking about Alex Murdaugh?
I think we all could stop talking about Alex Murdaugh, but there's just so much here. It is the case that keeps on growing. The tentacles of that octopus, Alex Murdaugh's head on it, just keep growing. And it seems like we will never be finished with it. And it's got all the things that we want to see because we're seeing the intricacies of the state criminal justice system and the federal system. And we're talking about victims' rights in this case, which I adore. Obviously, that people are talking about victims and they have attorneys and they're arguing on behalf of their clients, and there's missing money, and people are not telling the truth on lie detector tests. Shocking. I mean,
shocking.
It has everything. It has all the things.
It's truly like we're watching a John Grisham book in real life, essentially in our back door.
It is. And I think we forget how we got to this point. And I certainly don't want to be melodramatic about describing the chaos of Alex Murdaugh's legal journey. But this all started really with his son and the accident, the boating accident in which Mallory Beach was killed, and everything that happened there. And then, of course, the murder of Alex's wife and son. It's just, we forget, not that we forget, but it's just easy to be overwhelmed with the drama of it all, that we forget, at least for an instant, how we got here. And so
that's right.
It's
almost like these financial crimes that he was sentenced for today. It's almost like the letdown at the end of a really good book. It's almost like we've been through all of this and then we get the financial crimes. And what I found really interesting was, and I saw this online on a news source, was how the money, the reparations that were that Alec is required to pay back, some almost $9 million. Is that right, Sarah? How that was broken up. And I hope we'll get into that a little bit later. Some certainly went to victims' families, and that was great. But the lion's share of that money went to organizations that may have, at worst, played a role, and at best, turned a blind eye.
So you're talking about PMPED, his law firm in which he worked,
yes,
which has rebranded themselves as the Parker firm.
That's right.
It seems astounding to any of us to think that Alec could have perpetrated these financial crimes against the most vulnerable people for years, and no one knew until what was essentially the very end.
Until his brand, his reputation was already unraveling. He had, the boating accident had already happened. His life was already coming undone at the seams, and he was trying to keep it all together. And that's when his law firm decided to take a look into these issues.
It's scary. It's scary to me to think that this possibly could have stopped earlier. I don't run a law firm. I'm a nonprofit lawyer. So I don't run a huge firm in this way. But it seems to me anybody that's had a checking account knows how you check those things, or we should. If you're not
Mm,
balancing your checkbook, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to encourage you, take a look. You might find something in there that you need to argue with your bank about. But when you're in the position of being a law firm that is representing hundreds and hundreds of people, there's a duty that you owe to these clients. And for this to come out in the way it did was shocking, I think, to many of us in the legal field and many of us not in the legal field, because it just didn't make sense that this could go
sure.
on forever. And I think what is so troubling about these financial crimes, which seems like I get what you're saying. It seems like the letdown. It's not the sexy um, dramatics,
Murder
I mean,
trial.
for lack of a better word. But what's so troubling is that these people, they couldn't afford to have this loss. He stole from the most vulnerable people who were in the most horrific conditions, people who were physically unwell, people who had lost a parent, people who needed these funds.
Sure.
And instead of thinking about those people, Alec thought of himself and continuing the lies and the deceit and the crimes. And I think for these people who at least got to speak today, Ms. Pinkney spoke, and I believe one of the Satterfield sons spoke today
Sure.
in court. Anytime a victim has the opportunity to speak, it can be so empowering to them because, of course, they have had loss, they've had financial loss, a lack of trust in people who they had looked up to and trusted. But anytime they can reclaim their voice and say their piece, and it was really powerful what they said about, praying for Alec and forgiveness and just incredible people. I just have to say, on Easter Monday, this goes to show having these victims speak, having them represented in court, and being able to address the person who perpetrated such horrific crimes against them, addressing him in a courtroom where lots of people are watching, where thousands and thousands of people are anxiously awaiting what they've said, and addressing Alec. And then they're going to walk out the door and say, we've done our part. He has hurt us, he has stolen from us, but he's not stealing our power. He's not stealing our goodness. He's not stealing our heart. And I think that is so empowering, not only to these victims, but other victims who see them do that. So I really am inspired by victims when they're able to speak. And it's so difficult for many victims to get up and speak because you've got dozens and dozens of people in there, courtroom personnel, all of this. But to get up there and stand up for themselves and for what they lost and not be overcome by their loss is really, really powerful. And I'm just so glad to see it.
As someone who works with victims every single day in your job at SC Van, talk a little bit about the closure that the opportunity to do these victim impact statements. What kind of closure does that bring for a victim And I understanding that every victim is different, but what do those
Sure.
victim impact statements, how does that play a role in a victim's opportunity to heal and put some closure to that time in their lives that for many of them are incredibly painful?
When a person is victimized in some way, whether it is a physical assault, a sexual assault, a financial theft, a burglary where someone has lost their sense of safety in their own space, they were victimized not of their own choice, but by someone asserting their power over the victim in some way. And anytime a victim can reclaim that power with the support of the system, with the prosecutor, with law enforcement standing next to them, maybe with their attorney, an advocate, it is incredibly empowering to them because they can use their voice that maybe they couldn't stop their home from being burglarized. But they know that now I'm addressing this person or I'm addressing the court and telling the court who I am and what this has done to me and how what this person has done has affected me, but also what do I want to see happen? They get that power to say, this is what I want. This is what I would like to see. And of course, maybe the court will agree, maybe they won't, but having the opportunity to be there and stand in a room and have what they want to see happen, people to listen to that is incredibly empowering. And so I really encourage victims anytime they have that opportunity to speak. Or if they can't speak, a lot of times they'll say, I want to write it, and someone can read it on their behalf. Sometimes victims will say, I don't want to be in the same room as the perpetrator. I encourage them to work out something with Zoom where they can be in a separate space, but they can also regain that control and that power, that loss that they've had once they have been victimized in some way. And there are some victims and survivors that I've worked with that are angry at this point. They want to just everything that they went through, they want to talk about it, they want to look the perpetrator in the eye. And I understand that. That can be incredibly cathartic to say, you can't go anywhere. You're in handcuffs and you're going to listen. That's very empowering. There are some victims and survivors that I've worked with that don't even want to acknowledge the presence of the
Mm.
perpetrator. They just want to address the court and say, this is what we want to see happen, or this is what I think should happen, or this is how this has affected me. There are some folks that find it very cathartic to talk about forgiveness and how they have not let what happened to them change their outlook or change who they are. And all of those ways are incredibly powerful, and it just really depends on the victim as to what they need. And victims, they know what they're looking for. I don't ever discourage a victim from saying, "I'm angry that I'm here today." Sometimes just saying the words out loud to a room full of people that are listening and hanging on your every breath and word, it just fills you up in a way you didn't even know maybe that you needed. But that respect and that attention can be very, very powerful.
Sure.
So now I'm like, I don't even remember what your question was, but I hope I answered it.
Yeah, that was great. So let's move back to the Murdaugh sentencing today. There was a lot of chatter on X about this difference between a concurrent sentence and a consecutive sentence. So Alec Murdaugh was sentenced today to 40 years in federal prison that would not in federal in prison that would run concurrent to his time in state prison. So for those of us who are not lawyers who don't understand that jargon, that language, what does concurrent versus consecutive mean, and what are some of the nuances that are a part of that?
So I think of sentencing like we're on a highway and we're going the same way. So both directions. We're on Interstate 95 and we're headed north. If something is concurrent, it means that it's running at the exact same time in the same direction. Okay. So if someone is given a 10-year sentence in state court on one charge and they're given 15 years on another state charge concurrent, that means that the 10-year sentence and the 15-year sentence are going to run at the same time. If they were sentenced consecutively, using that same 10 years on one charge and 15 years on the other, for it to be consecutive, the person would have to serve the entirety of whatever they have on that 10-year sentence before that 15-year sentence could start. So it is consecutive to whatever the original sentence was. And this can happen both with multiple charges in state court or federal court. Someone can have 15 charges and they all run concurrently or consecutively. It can happen within the two systems that we have, a state system and the federal system, which is what we've got going on here with Alex Murdaugh. I think a lot of people were shocked that it was not consecutive. And in most situations, a concurrent sentence is the norm. It is pretty darn rare for there to be a consecutive sentence. And I think the word I used answering somebody's question on X was it has to be a super heinous act or has to be part of the negotiation. And someone said, well, this isn't heinous. And I was like, I'm not saying it's not heinous, but for the most part, it has to be an exceptional act. And also, the prosecutors generally have to ask for that. So in this situation, I think the prosecutors, the U.S. Attorney's Office was asking for 30 years concurrent. So that means running at the same time as his other charges. For the most part, a judge is not going to sentence someone consecutively without some sort of major hiccup and without the prosecutor asking for that. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but it's pretty rare.
Do you think that the life sentence, the 2 life sentences in state court, do you think that played a role in the decision to run for the U.S. prosecutor to ask for a concurrent versus a consecutive? So, for example, if someone got if he had a 20-year sentence in state court, might they have gone for a consecutive sentence versus a concurrent?
Sure, I think that absolutely had something to do with that. Let's not forget he's got his state court charges. He's a convicted murderer and he was given life sentences, 2 life sentences. Then he has convictions in state court, 27 years. I just pulled that out and I think it's about that. So don't come for me if I misquoted. I don't have it right in front of me. And now this is federal that's going to run concurrent, but it's very interesting because 40 years is longer than what his original sentence is and the state federal charges. But I'm going to come back to that because people are going to be like, no, he has life sentences. Hold on. So we've got life sentences. We've got state court financial crimes. Now we have federal financial crimes. They're all running concurrently. A lot of people on X, formerly known as Twitter, have said, well, what happens when Alex Murdaugh's murder convictions are remanded for new trial or vacated or whatever's going to happen there. First of all, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we have a lot of internet attorneys who think they know more about the law than they do. And I think that if what we saw in January with Justice Toll ruling in the way she did regarding the jury misconduct allegations, I think it would be very shocking for the appellate courts to do something with those cases. Now, of course, anyone can appeal. They can appeal for any reason. And people can appeal for things that, they lost an argument on letting in the financial crimes, for instance. That's entirely possible that they could, they want to win on that. Again, I don't think that that's going to happen. I don't think that the appellate courts in South Carolina are just going to say, you know what, this was just a bad draw here. Let's go ahead and start over from scratch. I don't think that's happening. I don't want to say there's no way that's going to happen because I'm a lawyer and there's always someone arguing on the other side of a lawyer. But I think that would be very rare for that to happen. I don't think it is nearly as common as the internet lawyers on X would have people believe. So essentially, Alex Murdaugh is serving life. He will never leave the State Department of Corrections or prison. I don't know how old he is. How old is he? 50, late 50s? 50s?
Sure.
We'll go with that. I mean, when folks say you're serving hard time, you're serving hard time. I mean, he's not out there getting his lattes and his manicures and, going to see the podiatrist about a bunion. I mean, we are talking, it's a rough existence. So 27 years at 50 years old, that might be a life sentence for the majority of people, honestly. So I think we kind of lose ourselves when we're thinking, oh, this should have been consecutive or, it shouldn't have been concurrent. We have an underlying life sentence. Is it possible for it to be remanded and heard? It's possible, but I doubt it. So he's got a lot of time, as we say in the Berg, a lot of time that he's got hanging over his head.
55 years old.
55. Thank you for looking that up. 55.
Yes, I wanted us to be accurate in our reporting here on Stepping Toward Justice.
We report. I think I'm very clear, and I want to be clear. I am not a reporter. I'm just trying to help people make sense of the things that we are seeing. And I'm sure there will be things that I will misquote. And if I do, I will gladly apologize for that. I am not intentionally trying to mislead anyone about the age of Alex Murdaugh in any way.
And if you are not a reporter, neither am I. So I'm glad we cleared that up.
We are not reporters. We are not.
No,
we're just making our way downtown.
That's right.
Chilling, walking fast, talking about stuff. Oh, it's a great song.
Great song. All right. So we were talking about this before we went on before we started recording. And there was we weren't really sure, but talk about a little bit Alex's team and their trying, maybe, we're not 100% sure, to get his prison time. Why would they want to get his prison time switched from him serving his time in a state prison versus him serving his time in a federal prison? What are the differences? What would make them want him to be in a federal prison?
I think there might be podiatrists in federal prison.
Oh, well, 55-year-olds might want a podiatrist. I don't know.
I mean, it's generally, prison is prison. It's not a good situation. No one is saying, I'm ready to go. However, it is generally an accepted fact that time in the federal system is somewhat less difficult than time in the state system. So federal time is generally easier time. They have more advantages, they have more access to, I hate to say entertainment, but libraries, activities, things that they may not have in the state system, which they generally don't have in the state system. So if you have a choice, you're going to say, heck yeah, I want to go to federal prison. I think everyone thinks of, is it Club Fed is what they call it, where it seems like it's a Martha Stewart existence where you knit a poncho and you walk out after 4 months. Maybe they have poncho knitting classes in the federal prison. I don't know that they have that in South Carolina prisons. I don't think they do. But it's just a generally easier time. But if someone is convicted first in the state system, most of the time, the feds are going to run their time, if not consecutively, because the feds have no obligation to run their sentence at the same time as the state. So the fact that it's concurrent at this point is a huge benefit to him, but really it's not, because he's got 2 life sentences for being a convicted murderer. So we can all get up in arms about how much time, in the federal system and this, and technically he would have a period of time consecutive to the state financial charges in the federal system. Yeah, but we're talking about 30, 40 years here. And I mean, if he possibly did the amount of opiates that he wanted us to believe he did, I can't imagine he's a super healthy guy. Even if he didn't have, what was it, 60 pills a day is what he wanted us to believe during
Right.
his murder trial. So maybe he's a miracle. I don't know. I don't know what the answer there is, but I don't want us to lose sight that he is a convicted murderer. He's sentenced to life in prison and then has extra years in state prison and extra years in federal prison, that's running concurrent. He's not going anywhere.
So you talked a little bit about, people being up in arms about his concurrent sentences versus consecutive sentences. If you were talking to a victim, someone who is on the other side of the the courtroom as the Alec Murdaugh in this case, how would you talk to them about seeing this sentence as a win for them as victims?
Sure, this is a win. It is, he has admitted his guilt. He has been sentenced to 40 years by Judge Gergel for his acts, his crimes. There is a huge advantage to a prosecutor, whether, solicitor in the state system or a US attorney in the federal system, not having to go to trial. And if there is some sort of plea negotiation that can happen, that can allow, or that will allow the defendant to accept responsibility, say, I'm guilty, that will allow a lot of really positive things to happen. There won't be a trial. Victims will not have to testify, which is incredibly grueling. It is incredibly difficult. No matter how prepared a victim and survivor think that they are, it is incredibly horrific to have to retell your story to a room of strangers and a jury and a judge. And it can often, for some victims, it is empowering to do so. For many victims, it can help take their healing back some. It can be a regression because they've had to relive that again. So I always like to talk about that with victims before they say, like, I'm ready to testify, I'm ready to do that. These are things to think about. And we don't always know how we're going to react or respond to that. You're going to save potentially weeks and weeks of time. You know, federal prosecutors, federal agents, all these people testifying for a 40-year guilty plea, for a sentence of 40 years on someone who has a 20-something, 27-year sentence on the state federal crimes and a life sentence on murder convictions. I think that's a win. I think that's pretty positive. And for a victim, it's important for them to understand that it's not going to take away their right to speak. It's not going to take away their right to be heard. They're still going to have the ability to do that, but it's done in a way that is a safer space for them. You know, if they go up and testify, they're going to be cross-examined by the defendant's lawyer. That can be really difficult. You know, no matter how much preparation, you know, you work with a victim to prepare them, it's difficult. And once it starts, you know, you can't say time out, let's stop. You know, you've got to continue. So you have to take so many things into account when you're a prosecutor as to what's going to be best for everyone involved. And if you can get someone to plead guilty and you end up with 40 years, that's generally a pretty damn good day in my book. So cheers to the U.S. Attorney's Office here, and for Judge Gergel for sentencing him, which I think is
Yeah.
the longest. Is it the most time for a financial crime in South Carolina? I'm pretty sure that I read that earlier today.
Did I read that the judge likened this case to the Bernie Madoff case?
Yeah.
That's a pretty strong connection, a strong comparison. I think I saw somebody else say that you know, the judge threw the book at Alex Murdaugh. It's a win for the victims. It was a good day in court.
It was. They were heard. The judge heard them and, you know, respected their statements. And, you know, Alex received his sentence. And, you know, maybe this will put some of this to rest for a little bit. I think this may be the last we hear of Alec for a little while. At least,
I'm gonna I'm gonna
am I hoping?
I'm gonna
Wishful
hold you
thinking?
to that, Sarah.
I hope so. I mean, I really do hope so. We've got the murder charges, we've got the financial stuff. Everything's been relatively wrapped up. You know, appeals can take years. So I don't anticipate that that's going to be something that we're going to hear about in the near future. So I think, fingers crossed, this may be at least a resting period. We're going to go into hibernation maybe on the Alex Murdaugh case,
And
which
wouldn't that be nice?
that would be so nice. It would be so
Sure.
nice.
So the big question that X was literally blowing up over. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Where was Dick Harpootlian today?
Dun dun dun. I don't
Where
know.
was he?
I don't know. Where was he? I haven't checked his X account. I don't know if it was addressed. Maybe I missed it on the news or in an article, but I didn't see where it was addressed. It was just that Grim Griffin, Jim, was that like a Freudian slip? Is that what a Grim?
Ugh.
Grim. Jim Griffin, you know, handled things as he kind of normally does
Yeah.
with no Dick Harpootlian. So I don't know where Dick
And,
was.
and 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 honestly, Jim's been like the most first chair, second chair a lawyer could possibly be in a case.
He's worn a lot of hats. I'll give him that for sure.
He
He's worn a
sure
lot of
has.
hats.
And you can't fault him for his loyalty. I mean, you can fault him, but he's been loyal.
He is the definition of a loyal friend and companion. to Alex Murdaugh, it appears, from the outside looking in. I think I think as Forrest Gump once said, "That's all I have to say about that."
All right, so no other comment about where Harpootlian was today. They are in still in session
It's true, but I
in
don't think they have
Columbia.
session today. It's not a Tuesday, it's a Monday,
Oh, that's
so
true. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Well, maybe he had an
maybe
important committee meeting.
maybe he did, maybe he was in court for one of his other clients, perhaps, I don't know.
Could could be, or maybe he was advocating for the VOCA money that Attorney General Wilson is asking the state to pass in the budget.
That would be amazing if he was. I would be very grateful.
Sarah, do
You
you
kn
have any updates on where that stands, where the budget process stands? Do we know where the budget process stands? For those of you who maybe didn't listen to last week's episode, VOCA money was a federal money that was for victim services. It has been cut significantly. Attorney General Wilson has asked the state legislature to put it in their budget that they are working on and will pass it by the end of the session for next year. It's critical funds, critical money for organizations like SC Van, which Sarah works for and represents. And so it needs to happen. It needs to be put into the
Yes.
budget. The federal government needs to step up and replenish those coffers so that victims can have their voice as amplified as possible.
That was so nice, Deke. It's so true because the VOCA money, the Victims of Crime Act, is funded through fines and fees and things in the federal system. And for a while there, after there were so many opioid settlements and things that happened with the big pharma, the money was really, really up. And so a lot of organizations, a lot of states really did a really great job at really solidifying victim services. So hiring victim advocates in, all law enforcement agencies, really putting funding into support services for victims, making sure they have access to counseling, representation. You know, it's there's so much that a victim may need, and we've done so much in South Carolina and across the country really. And so when you have money that's been cut 30% for years now, and we're looking at almost 40% cut this year potentially, that's a huge, huge loss. And in fact, our victim services is dwindling instead of expanding where it needs to. At the Victims Matter rally, I mentioned to someone just in conversation, we have 6 attorneys at SC Van, and we represent victims all across the state. We could absolutely hire another 6 attorneys to do the work that we're doing, to train advocates and law enforcement and work with prosecutors and support victims. But we can't sustain that right now. And we have a number of federal grants that are ending. I know there are so many organizations that are in the same situation, and we've made such incredible strides in the past few years in victim services and what we have been able to do for victims and with victims. And I just hate to see us in a situation where a lot of that will potentially go away. So I definitely encourage people to reach out to your legislators, to your senators, to your representatives, and tell them how important victim services is. And while the money that they can contribute to the attorney general's ask, it won't expand services. It will at least help hold them for a little while, for another year. So really would appreciate everybody making that call or sending that email. You can find the link to join us in that ask for your legislators, a ready-made email. We'll put that in the bio and our show notes for this episode.
That's right. It was in last week's episode notes, but we will make sure to add them as many weeks as we need to until that money we know is in the budget. And we'll continue to do it until the governor's signature is on that budget and it is ready to go for the following year. It is incredibly important for victim services that money be put into the state budget, and then again the federal government to step up and renew those funds that have been cut. So anything else on the Murdaugh saga? Truly a saga
It is a
before
saga.
we shift
I
gears.
I've not watched the Lifetime movie, but someone asked me about it this past week. They were like, "Did you know there was a movie?" And I said, "I just can't." And I'm a Hallmark kind of girl sometimes, but I just could not. It's just too devastating to watch that sort of stuff, and it's difficult for me to watch. I don't do the true crime movies and things. It's heartbreaking to me to watch it dramatized like that. And I know a lot of people
Sure.
can watch that and they can, it's hard when you see situations like this regularly. But I heard it was terrible. If that makes anybody feel better, if they haven't watched it yet, I heard it was
Well,
terrible. So,
I mean, it is Lifetime, so I'll just leave it
I
at
mean,
that.
those are fighting words, Zeke
I know,
Stephenson,
I know, I
fighting
know.
words.
I I will, and I watched the first season of the documentary on Netflix, and I started the second season. I listening to those kids. I mean, they're kids
Yeah,
talk about
it's tough.
something that's going to haunt them for the rest of their lives. It's just devastating.
It is. It absolutely is.
Truly devastating.
I do want us to end on a positive note though,
Sure.
because
What you got?
I don't know if anybody else is as interested in women's basketball as I am right now. I am a true believer in the value of women's sports and these incredible athletes. They are
Truly.
incredible. And I'm super excited for our Gamecocks. Our Lady Gamecocks are in the Final Four. And Coach Dawn Staley, huge fan. And I just think you're an incredible coach.
Coach Staley, come on our podcast, please.
But oh my gosh, this Kim Mulkey, coach for LSU, I don't know if y'all caught her outburst at that presser I guess it was about a week ago now. Like,
It was a week
I will
ago,
sue
yeah.
the Washington Post if they put anything out there that's false. So many people have been, what is going to be in this article? And then
That's
I
right.
read the article and I was like, I want to read her book. Like, she wrote a book, and now I'm like, I kind of feel bad for her a little bit. I kind of see where she's coming from, why she's so angry all the time, or why she seems so vicious. And I was like, I don't know. I feel like it upped her in my book. I mean,
Sure.
obviously, I'm a Coach Staley girl from now until kingdom come, but I thought her reaction to, "I'm gonna sue the Washington Post." I'm not doing a really good impression of Kim Mulkey, but I'm gonna sue the Washington Post if they print any of this. And then it just kind of explained why she is the way she is. I mean, she's a fighter, she is a tough coach, but she's a winner too. And so I thought
Sure.
it was pretty phenomenal.
Sure. And it was I felt like it was one of those situations where she was playing offense before she needed to play defense. And so it was like, let's set this bar really high that this is going to be
It's a hit
a
piece.
it is a hit piece. It is a game changer. Let's see how many sports analogies I can throw into the conversation.
Right in the hoop.
And then the article came in way lower than that. It was honestly a beautiful PR stunt.
I thought it was, and I was like, "Dang, wow." And I think someone was telling me that the writer, the reporter has South Carolina connections, maybe went to USC, which I'm like, "I gotta look that up." I will look that up, Zeke. We don't look that up.
Drama. The
Trauma.
drama continues to
But
unfold. Let's
but
get into the coach's head.
but I just thought it was really, really neat that it was just so dramatic, and it was just kind of a letdown, but also an explanation of why maybe she is the way she is, which made me think, okay, like I don't dig your ways, but I can see how people would, and I can see why you're a really good coach. Not like Coach Dawn Staley, but I'm just really excited for women's basketball right now. I feel like more
Yeah.
people are watching women's basketball than men's basketball. It's just we've got some characters in there. Like these women are just ready to roll. They are super talented. They are incredible athletes. I'm thrilled. It makes me happy. And also the
It,
Gamecocks are like killing it. They are just winning. I'm proud to be a
and
Gamecock.
and I will, I am a North Carolina kid,
Mhm. Sorry, did I say
and
that out loud?
it pains me, but I'm pulling for the
You
Gamecocks.
gotta pull for the Gamecocks. You got
And
to.
I'm in Clemson territory, but I'm
You
gonna
gotta pull
pull
for the
for those
Gamecocks.
Gamecocks,
Those women are
and
representing South Carolina in such
so
amazing ways.
well.
I'm just
So
thrilled.
well. So well.
So,
So I think that we should try and get a X petition going to strongly encourage Dawn Staley to come be a guest on Stepping Toward Justice. So all of our listeners, all of our followers, let's start this
I'm
and
not gonna be
see.
mad if y'all ask her to come chat with me for a little bit. I would be
I
so thrilled.
mean, it would be truly incredible to have Sarah A. Ford and Coach Dawn Staley on a call, on a Zoom, on a whatever together, having a conversation about true crime, because I hear she's a huge true crime fan,
Yes, I've heard that.
about basketball, women's basketball, and the place that women's sports has in our society. And I think the women's tournament is way better than the men's
It's
tournament.
so good. It's so good. It's just great.
So
I'm loving it.
so X, formerly Twitter sphere, get to going and get Dawn Staley on Stepping Towards Justice.
Coach, anytime. So we've talked Murdoch, we've talked women's basketball, we've talked Kim Mulkey. I feel like I have a few people in my life who are gonna be mad because I was talking a little bit positively about Kim Mulkey, but obviously glowing about our Lady Gamecocks. I'm super excited for them, and yeah. It's
Sarah, we're
it's
just
just
getting started.
we're just getting started. It is incredible to think about all the different ways that we can pursue justice. It's not just in our court system. It's not just, we're talking about Alex Murdaugh and the federal system, but to see women's sports where they are right now and the respect that women's basketball is receiving, that is justice to me. The women who fought
Truly.
for decades for the right to be there and have access, and then to see how people are following it so much more than the men's tournament. That is justice. And there's so
Right.
much more for us to talk about. So we hope you
Right.
will join us again very soon on our next episode of Stepping Toward Justice with me, Sarah A. Ford, and Zeke Stephenson, my partner in crime and wonderful
That's
producer.
right. Happy to be here. And make sure you follow us on X Get out there. Let's get Dawn Staley on the show.
He's not going to give it up, y'all. He's not.
Not
And
gonna give it
I'm
up.
here for this. I'm here for it.
That's right.
Bye, y'all. Have a good one.
See ya. Bye.